The cabin stood hidden among tall pine trees, its wooden walls echoing with the quiet breath of the mountains. He had inherited it unexpectedly, from a relative he barely remembered, and when he first arrived, he thought it was nothing more than an abandoned home waiting for dust and silence to consume it. But that night, when he opened the creaking door, he realized the cabin was not empty. Four women, graceful and radiant in their own ways, stepped out of the shadows as though the place itself had been keeping them safe for years. Their beauty was undeniable, yet it was not their appearance that left him speechless, but the calm strength in their eyes, as if they had been waiting for him all along. At first, he believed it was a trick of the night, or perhaps his own loneliness painting illusions across the dim light of the lantern. But when one of them, with a voice soft as falling snow, whispered, "You're not just our guest, you're our destiny," something inside him shifted. It was not an invitation of desire but a declaration of fate, a truth spoken with the weight of time. He felt his heart pound as if it had finally recognized the rhythm it was meant to follow. Each woman carried an aura different from the others. One spoke with wisdom, her words like poetry that healed his tired thoughts. Another laughed with a warmth that melted away the years of emptiness he had carried within him. The third looked at him with a quiet devotion that made him believe in loyalty again. And the fourth moved with a grace that reminded him that life was not only about survival but about beauty, love, and wonder. Together, they formed a harmony that the world outside could never offer. The cabin transformed before his eyes, no longer an old wooden house but a place alive with light and warmth. Nights passed where they shared stories under the fire's glow, their voices weaving threads of belonging around him. Days were filled with laughter spilling into the forest, footsteps crossing paths like an eternal dance. He no longer felt like a stranger wandering through inherited walls. He felt like a man who had found the missing pieces of his soul. Yet beneath the serenity, he sensed a mystery. Why had they been waiting for him, and why did they believe he was their destiny? The answers did not come in words but in the silent bond they shared, in the way their presence lifted the weight from his heart. With them, he discovered love not as a fleeting spark but as a flame strong enough to endure storms, a love written long before he ever arrived at the cabin. Every moment with them was a promise, every glance an echo of something eternal. And as the wind whispered through the trees outside, he knew the cabin was never meant to be a shelter of wood and stone. It was a sanctuary of hearts, and within it, his life had finally begun. The cabin smelled of pinewood and faint traces of smoke, as though the air itself carried the memory of forgotten fires. He stood in the doorway, still clutching the iron key that had opened this place, uncertain whether he had stepped into a dream or into the arms of destiny itself. The four women before him did not flinch, nor did they treat him as a stranger trespassing into their sanctuary. Instead, their presence was calm, deliberate, as if they had rehearsed this moment long before he was even born. The eldest of them, or perhaps it was only the wisdom in her eyes that made her appear so, was the first to move closer. Her hair fell in soft waves of chestnut brown, and when she spoke, her voice was gentle, but it carried a certainty that silenced his doubts. "You are here at last," she said, not asking but affirming. "This house has been waiting for you, and so have we." He swallowed, his chest tight with disbelief. "I don't understand. Who are you?" The second woman, whose laughter was like the sunlight slipping through the leaves, tilted her head playfully. "Names will come later," she replied. "What matters now is that you have come to claim what is yours, though it is not walls and wood you were meant to inherit. It is us, all of us." Her words sank into him with a strange weight, and he almost staggered under the force of them. He had spent years alone, moving through life as though it were a long corridor with no doors, no open windows, no voices calling his name. Now, suddenly, he stood in a cabin where four pairs of eyes regarded him as if he were the missing piece to a puzzle too vast for him to comprehend. The third woman, quiet and reserved, stepped forward then. Her gaze was steady, unwavering, as though she could see the cracks in his soul that he had kept hidden even from himself. She reached out, her fingertips brushing against his hand, a touch so delicate that it burned like fire. "You don't need to understand everything tonight," she said. "Just stay, and you will know why we call you Destiny." The last of them, the one who had spoken the words that would forever echo in his heart, "You're not just our guest, you're our destiny," stood slightly apart from the others. Her beauty was ethereal, but it was the sorrow in her eyes that pierced him the most. She looked at him as though she had found something she had lost centuries ago, and yet feared it might slip from her fingers again. When she finally spoke, her voice trembled like the first notes of a song long forgotten. "We have waited, through silence and time, for the moment you would walk through that door. Do not leave us empty again." He felt his knees weaken. He closed the door behind him, shutting out the cold wind and the world he had known. Inside, the air warmed, the lantern seemed to glow brighter, and the cabin transformed before his eyes. The dust and shadows he had noticed when he first entered were gone, replaced by living warmth as though their very presence breathed life into every corner. The women moved gracefully around him, guiding him deeper inside. A fire crackled in the hearth though he had not lit it. A table was already set with bowls of fruits, bread, and honeyed tea that seemed impossibly fresh in such a secluded place. His mind spun with questions, but his heart, his foolish, yearning heart, remained still, as if it had known all along that this night would come. They ate together. The second woman's laughter filled the room as she teased him gently for the way he stared at everything as if it were an illusion about to vanish. "Do you think us ghosts?" she asked, her smile radiant. "Are you not?" he whispered. Her laughter softened, and she leaned closer. "Would a ghost's touch feel like this?" she asked, brushing her hand lightly across his cheek. His breath caught, his skin alive under the warmth of her fingertips. The eldest spoke again, her voice carrying the weight of unspoken truths. "We are bound to this place, yes, but we are not illusions. We are women with hearts that beat, with souls that burn. And we have always belonged to you, though you were far away until now." "Why me?" he asked, his voice breaking with the enormity of it all. "Why would 4 women, so beautiful, so alive, say I am their destiny?" The quiet one looked at him, her dark eyes deep as endless water. "Because love does not always follow reason. It follows threads spun before we take our first breath. And yours were woven into ours." Her words wrapped around him, pulling him into a silence where he could hear only the thrum of his heart. He wanted to believe them, though fear still clawed at him. He had always been ordinary, unnoticed, living his life as if it mattered little to anyone. Yet here, in this cabin, 4 women looked at him as though he were everything. The night deepened, and they showed him the rooms of the cabin, each glowing with its own light, each alive with the scent of pine, wildflowers, and something unnameable. The 4th woman, the one with sorrow and beauty interwoven in her eyes, led him to the largest room where the moonlight spilled through a wide window. "This was never just a cabin," she whispered. "It is a sanctuary, built to shelter what is rare and unbreakable. Love that defies time." He turned to her, unable to keep the question buried any longer. "And what am I to you?" She stepped closer, so close that he could feel her breath against his skin. "You are the one who makes us whole. Without you, we are shadows bound to waiting. With you, we are alive." His throat tightened. He wanted to reach out, to hold her, to feel if she was truly flesh and blood, but his courage faltered. She sensed it, and instead, she reached for his hand, pressing it to her chest. Beneath his palm, her heart beat, strong, steady, undeniable. "Believe in us," she said softly, "and believe in yourself." That night, he did not sleep. He sat by the fire with the 4 women surrounding him, their voices weaving stories of lives that seemed too vast to be contained within the span of ordinary years. They spoke of waiting, of promises made before time scattered them apart. They spoke of the pain of silence, of watching the world pass while they remained unseen. And they spoke of him, the man they had always known would return. He listened, torn between awe and fear, yet slowly, the fear faded. With every word, every glance, every touch, he felt pieces of himself unlocking. He was not just an ordinary man who had stumbled upon an inheritance. He was the answer to a story far older than himself. As dawn's first light touched the horizon, he finally rose from his place by the fire. The women looked at him with quiet anticipation, as if waiting for him to leave, to doubt, to break the fragile thread of destiny. But he did not move toward the door. Instead, he turned back to them, his voice low but certain. "I will stay." The silence that followed was not empty. It was filled with a profound relief, with joy unspoken but deeply felt. The second woman laughed softly, her eyes bright with tears she did not shed. The quiet one closed her eyes, as if in silent prayer. The eldest nodded, her expression serene, while the fourth, the one whose sorrow had haunted him most, smiled for the first time, a smile that lit the room more than the fire ever could. In that moment, he knew he had crossed a threshold. He was no longer a wanderer carrying the weight of loneliness. He was a man chosen, claimed not by chance but by fate. And though questions still lingered like shadows in the corners of his mind, his heart no longer resisted. For the first time, he felt alive in a way that terrified him, and yet, he never wanted it to end. The cabin, the women, the silence of the forest, they were no longer strangers. They were his home. The days that followed unfolded like a dream suspended between reality and something far greater. The cabin was no longer silent, no longer a forgotten relic of inheritance. It had become a place alive with laughter, whispers, footsteps across wooden floors, and the warmth of hearts uniting under one roof. Yet beneath the serenity, there was always an unspoken tension, a quiet question pressing against the edges of his mind. Why had fate chosen him? He woke each morning to the sound of soft voices and the smell of bread warming on the fire. The women moved around him with ease, each carrying a presence that filled the cabin differently. The eldest offered guidance, her wisdom steadying him whenever doubt stirred. The second filled the house with joy, reminding him that life was not just about answers but about the music of the present moment. The third offered silence and understanding, her presence like the calm surface of a lake where his thoughts could rest. And the fourth, she remained the heart of it all, her eyes still carrying shadows of sorrow, but her smile beginning to grow more often in his presence. One evening, as twilight stretched its violet fingers across the forest, he walked outside. The air was sharp and clean, the pines whispering their secrets to the wind. The fourth woman followed him, her steps silent, her presence a weight he both longed for and feared. "You were restless," she said gently. He turned to her, the ache in his chest unspoken. "I don't know what I'm supposed to be. You say I'm your destiny, but what does that mean? Why me?" She stepped closer, her gaze searching his. "Because love is not always earned by greatness. It is claimed by truth. You are not here because of power, or wealth, or fame. You are here because your heart was always meant to find ours." He lowered his eyes, still uncertain. "But I've done nothing. I've lived as though I were invisible. I don't deserve." Her hand touched his chin, lifting his face back to hers. "Deserve has nothing to do with it. Fate does not choose the strongest or the most worthy. It chooses the one whose soul carries the missing note of the song. And you are that note." His throat tightened as her words sank in, pressing against the years of emptiness he had carried. For the first time, he began to believe. Inside, the fire burned low, and the others gathered around him. That night, they spoke not only of destiny but of sacrifice. The eldest revealed what he had not dared to ask. "This bond we share is not endless without you," she said, her voice steady but tinged with sorrow. "We were bound to this cabin, waiting through silence and shadow. Without you, we fade. With you, we live." but for this bond to remain, you must give yourself fully. Half a heart cannot hold what destiny demands. He stared at them, the weight of her words crushing him. Give myself fully. What does that mean? The quiet one, always honest and unflinching, answered softly. It means you cannot live as half a man. 1 foot in the world you left, 1 foot here. If you choose us, you must let go of everything else. No return, no second life beyond these walls. You will belong to us, as we belong to you. The air grew heavy. His thoughts raced with visions of the world beyond, the cities, the noise, the people he once knew. Yet when he tried to imagine returning, his heart recoiled. That world had never been home. Here, with them, he had felt something he had never known before, belonging. Still, fear gnawed at him. What if he was not enough? What if he failed them, if his presence was not strong enough to bind their existence? Sensing his turmoil, the second woman reached for his hand. Do not measure yourself by what you fear. Love is not a chain. It is a fire. You are enough because you are the flame we have been waiting for. Tears pricked his eyes. He looked at them. 4 women who carried their hearts openly before him. 4 souls who spoke of him not as a stranger but as their completion. Slowly, something within him began to rise, stronger than fear, deeper than doubt. I will not leave, he whispered. His voice trembled, but the truth within it did not. If what you say is true, if I am the note that completes your song, then I give myself to you. All of me, no return, no hesitation. I belong here, with you. The silence that followed was sacred, heavy with a power that seemed to ripple through the air itself. The women's eyes shone with light, not just from the fire but from something eternal. The 4th woman stepped forward, tears glittering in her gaze, and for the first time, her sorrow was gone. She pressed her forehead against his and whispered, now the circle is whole. That night, something shifted in the cabin. The walls seemed to glow with warmth, the fire burned brighter, and the air vibrated with a harmony unseen. He felt it within himself too, a strength flowing through his veins, as though the bond had awakened something long dormant. He was no longer the man who had walked in with doubts and fear. He was no longer a guest. He was theirs. Days turned into weeks, and life in the cabin deepened into rhythm. He chopped wood with the eldest, learning patience and purpose from her. He laughed with the second until his ribs ached, learning joy from her unquenchable spirit. He sat in silence with the third, learning peace in the quiet between words. And he walked often with the 4th, their hands entwined, learning that love was not always light, it was also the courage to face the shadows together. Each woman loved him differently, yet together they formed a single force, a bond that filled every corner of his heart. And he, in turn, gave himself to them, not in fragments, but whole, complete, unreserved. But destiny is never without trials. One night, as the forest howled with winter wind, the fire suddenly dimmed, and a chill swept through the cabin. The women exchanged tense glances. The eldest spoke first. It is testing us, she whispered. He frowned. What is? The bond, the quiet one said softly. It is new, and the threads must be tested. If we falter, if fear breaks us, the bond will unravel, and we will fade. His heart pounded. What must I do? The 4th woman stepped forward, her eyes steady and strong. Do not falter. Do not doubt. Stay with us, heart and soul. No matter the shadows, no matter the whispers of fear, you must hold on. The wind roared louder, rattling the windows. The fire nearly died, and with it, the warmth in the cabin drained away. He felt fear claw at him, whispering lies. You are not enough. You are ordinary. You cannot save them. But then he looked at them, the 4 women who had given him their trust, their hearts, their destiny. He saw their faces pale in the dim light, their eyes fixed on him as if he were the only anchor keeping them from vanishing. Something fierce ignited within him. No, he said aloud, his voice cutting through the storm. I will not let go. You are mine, and I am yours. Whatever fate demands, whatever shadow threatens us, I will not fail you." At his words, the fire roared back to life, flames leaping high and golden. Warmth rushed through the cabin, and the women's faces lit with renewed strength. The storm outside howled once more, then fell silent, leaving only the crackle of fire and the steady rhythm of breath. The eldest smiled, her eyes filled with pride. "You have chosen well, and destiny has accepted your vow." Exhausted but unbroken, he sank into their arms, surrounded by love stronger than any storm. From that night on, the bond never wavered. The cabin was no longer just a place of waiting but a home of fulfillment, where love wove itself into every corner. He was not an outsider who had stumbled into mystery, he was the heart that completed it. And so he lived, not as a man who had inherited walls and timber, but as one who had inherited destiny itself, the love of 4 women who had waited through silence and time, and who now, at last, were whole.